down to Florida and westward to Arkansas and Louisiana. As part of our mission, one of the things we work to do is actually expand access to capital for energy efficiency investments to all income brackets around the region so that they can realize the benefits of energy efficiency in their homes and businesses. Today, we're actually going to be presenting content on how lenders in the area can actually use energy efficiency programming as a means to satisfy obligations under the Community Reinvestment Act. To help us do that, we're joined by Travis Yelverton, who is a consultant to SEIA and expert in all things lending and energy efficiency. He'll be joined by Sherry Eddy, CEO of Jax Metro Credit Union in Jacksonville, Florida, and Tracy Graham, a CRA specialist with Bancorp South. With that, I'm going to turn controls over to Mr. Yelverton, and he will take it from here.
All right, thank you, Wesley. Can you hear me okay?
I can. You have controls?
I believe I do.
Okay.
I do. Thanks. All right, welcome everybody. We'll start out with some overview on CRA, and I know most everybody on this call is probably familiar with it, so I won't belabor the point too long, but then we'll talk about how we can blend the opportunity with energy efficiency programs. The CRA has been around for decades now. Actually, this year is its 40th anniversary, as a matter of fact, and it was designed to end the practice of redlining within a bank service area and ensuring fair access to credit was being provided by all insured institutions. Now, CRA contains only a handful of punitive measures with non-compliance, but they are important ones, and they include mergers and branch expansions that can be limited or denied if a bank is not in compliance with CRA. Now, in the banking world, I think it's fair to say that they're still recovering, or maybe you can say reshaping the industry in a lot of ways since the 08 financial crisis. But these measures are still meaningful for banks. Even last year, in years before, there's still about 40 to 50 bank mergers per year. So there's still significant activity going on in this area for banks, and CRA is an important component of that for compliance. So, and I also want to recognize that CRA examinations have been criticized in the past for low levels of failing grades, maybe not being a tough enough standard, et cetera. But I think that's changing a little bit. Maybe some of you saw recently that Wells Fargo was handed a poor rating and a failing grade a couple months ago, and that's one of the top 5 or 6 banks in the U.S. Now, granted, maybe they were kicking them a little bit while they were down. I know Wells Fargo's had some other troubles with accounts and et cetera, and some fraud allegations, but I think that as you know, banking regulations are coming under review or scrutiny in this current administration, that the effectiveness of something like CRA and the benefits of something like the CRA remain important, and maybe more than ever. So I think all parties involved continue to take this seriously. So I think what we want to look at is some new market lending tools that can be engaged for CRA compliance. Now, in July of last year, there was a Q&A posted to the Federal Register, and I do have a digital copy of this if anybody would like me to forward it to you after the webinar. But this release in July helped to clarify the ability of banks to use energy efficiency lending as a tool for CRA compliance. You can see the comments about EE and water conservation for affordable housing, and also community facilities that serve LMI, and of course by that I mean low to moderate income, LMI residences and communities, are some of these examples given on how you can have compliance with CRA. And they also reiterated the fact that you can make qualified investments for community development into an organization that has these kinds of activities that is also in an area that matches your bank's footprint or even larger. So, you know, 501c3s that are out there working in a similar service area, qualified investments into them as well, running EE programs, also can qualify for CRA credit. So this was kind of born for me from attending a development finance event last year where this was discussed. And I saw a need and really an opportunity to provide education and outreach and working with SEIA's innovative finance program and kind of discussing this recent development of, you know, interjecting energy efficiency into CRA compliance. I thought I could discuss these recent developments, gauge some interest from banks in the Southeast, and collect some feedback. And this idea was also supported from the U.S. Department of Energy and their Weatherization and Intergovernmental Programs Office as well. I'm aware, too, that there are parallel efforts going on from FDIC staff. I have spoken with them about these as well and made them aware of these efforts. Obviously, as a regulatory oversight agency, it really wasn't appropriate for us to kind of combine forces on this, but I think it's important to know that both of us are having these kind of somewhat coordinated efforts to get the word out about this. Also wanted to mention, too, if any of you have heard of the National Community Reinvestment Coalition, the NCRC, another example of how CRA really seems to be in the news more this year than recently. They held their annual conference about a month ago, and it first hit my radar actually because Fed Chair Janet Yellen was speaking at this conference, and I think we know that any time she speaks, markets can sometimes move, but I thought that was a big deal. But also they took the time to highlight some really landmark investments in this area. There was $30 billion commitment from Fifth Third Bank for their community development plan, and also a couple of $16 billion plans from Key Bank and Huntington Bank. So now, granted, I see, this kind of energy efficiency program as a key component of a broader community development plan that works towards CRA compliance. And I think the point I want to be able to, to relay today is that I think the EE programs can really be a key component of these kind of plans, and of course, scale them for your bank size. So there's a renewed visibility here with CRA, and there's this opportunity to blend the positive outcomes of energy efficiency programs and the Community Reinvestment Act. But as we dig into them further, I think it's only fair that let's talk about the challenges to these kind of programs now that we've talked about the opportunity. And maybe the better way to kind of phrase this is really vetting the opportunity and I think hitting a couple of key points on what banks should be looking at if they want to consider these kind of programs. I recognize that developing such a program is not an overnight decision process, obviously, and there are certain challenges that could be unique to each bank, but here's a couple that I think are probably applicable to all. You want to form these beneficial alliances in each of your service areas. As we know, compliance on CRA is measured across your entire footprint of your bank, and you don't have to have full compliance in each and every market. You can have an aggregate of compliance, but I think what that does is opens the opportunity to look at your strongest connections with communities that are in your footprint and be able to form alliances with some willing partners in those key markets. Talk to utilities, talk to contractors, local government officials, et cetera, and figure out where your bank might have the best maybe staff is connected in with the community in that area. Maybe you have long-standing relationships in a certain community, and find where might be a key area that you can maybe start this as a pilot program. I think that's something that take that first step as a consideration. Another key challenge: crafting acceptable underwriting guidelines. You want to have a matrix that is going to be inclusive of LMI households so that you can obtain the CRA credit as part of this program. But in fairness, you don't want to uncomfortably raise the program's risk profile either. So I think that's something I think we can help with some best practices that we can share, and hopefully you can find a happy balance there. To kind of reiterate the stakeholders and the partner targets here. Now I know FDIC and OCC, that's not typically somebody that's on your outgoing speed dial, but I think for this purpose, reaching out to them to talk about EE programs and CRA compliance, I think you'll find some like-minded ears that might be worth your discussion. So I still recommend that. Community redevelopment agencies, that's what they're called here in Florida. They might be called something different in other states, but that's your city and county entities that are geared towards revitalization in LMI neighborhoods and have some residential and possibly commercial benefits and programs. I think they can be a key ally in this kind of outreach. Obviously, your elected officials finding a champion who maybe has this kind of issue close to their heart, or maybe it's part of their platform. I think that could be a great ally to have. And your local and regional NGOs that might be working in energy efficiency or LMI activities. You can find those. Maybe they're foundations, maybe they're CDCs, but those can be out there. And finding those in certain communities could be a strong ally as well. Your local utility, of course, very strong partner. Local governments, perhaps the electeds officials, you don't find a kindred spirit there, but staff at city and county, you're very likely to find somebody working in a similar area there, and that could be a key ally to look at too. And your area contractors and auditors will kind of belabor that point several times, that they're critical to the marketing of this kind of program. And state NGOs, for example, in Florida, we have the Florida Redevelopment Association, and they're the trade association for our community redevelopment agencies, and maybe you have something similar in your state. So, a little quick program design overview. You wanted to establish minimum and maximum loan amounts. I think you want it to be, not too low so that it's worth the staff time and worth, putting out the capital of the bank, but you also don't want to make it too high to where you're maybe broaching into something that, unsecured maybe shouldn't handle, or maybe you should look at doing it under a HELOC or some kind of second mortgage. So I think finding that, 2 to 15,000, 3 to 20,000, finding that area is a good idea for framing this program correctly. Look at your eligible activities, energy efficiency, and weatherization upgrades. And quick point on weatherization: if you're familiar with PACE, Property Assessed Clean Energy, it's becoming prevalent in a lot of states, and I'm real familiar with it here in Florida. But I'll say that Florida is one of the only states, there might be one or two other, that has included weatherization as part of PACE legislation. And so for that reason, it really took off down in Miami for, hurricane strengthening and those kind of things. But in most states, weatherization is not an eligible activity under PACE. So I look at that as a strength for a bank-led EE program to be able to not only offer weatherization in addition to energy efficiency, but also use that as maybe a promotional tool, as a marketing tool. Because if PACE happens to be prevalent in your market, and they can't do weatherization, that could be a niche that you could use to further the program. I think that's worth mentioning. Obviously, Energy Star appliances and that kind of replacement for eligible activities. Audits, you may or may not require audits, but I think it's an important tool that you can use in underwriting criteria, and then our two guest experts today can, I think, speak to that even further. And then finally, on your lending terms, something that's reasonable, maybe can't match up the useful life of some of your longer equipment, like 15-year HVAC, et cetera, but something that's appropriate for unsecured. And then you have a project here that is providing monthly energy savings. So I think there's a balance between the useful life of the equipment and the benefits and the cash flow that it creates to make the monthly payments. And try to keep administrative fees low and try to have some reasonable interest rates, and obviously this is unsecured debt, but try to keep it viable for your customers, of course. A few more best practices, a few more bullets, and we'll turn it over to the experts here. Underwriting guidelines, perhaps you want to set some that have different requirements for higher and lower amounts. Maybe different debt-to-income requirements, et cetera. Or perhaps you want to find a threshold where maybe under a certain amount it can be more of a matrix decision, and then if it's a larger amount, you can have staff do some more thorough underwriting. The reason I mention that is one of the concerns I've heard in talking with during this outreach is staffing concerns for this kind of program, and I think that's a fair challenge, and perhaps this is something to use as a possible solution. And use the underwriting guidelines that are more favorable for projects which have been audited and that are expected to provide positive cash flow. Kind of as I just mentioned, this really is one of the very unique features of this type of program. These programs, this kind of energy efficiency lending, these are actual projects that have produced actual cash flow and lowering utility bills. Not a lot of lending that you can say that does that. So I like it to be treated with, as an additional underwriting criteria, as opposed to what folks used to do with HELOC back in the days of, buying boats and second homes and letters of credit. That's the kind of thing that was going on when I got out of banking in 2007. But these projects produce cash flow, reduce utility bills, and that really is unique. And I think that's a point to always keep in mind here. And as I alluded to before, partners are key. Look at a service area where your bank officers have established contacts. It can make for a great pilot program, leverage your local utilities and your municipal contacts. And then as you build that contractor database and vet those, they become your best pipeline for customers in this new program. And I think you'll hear that reinforced. And look at your staff that's plugged into those communities. So I'll just hit on a few more bullets before I turn it over to our guest experts today. Doing a marketing campaign for this kind of program, do a combination of internal and external. You're going to be able to use this as a cross-sell for your existing customers, but also it can be a leader in for a new customer base that really appreciates the fact that you have this kind of niche program. That's a key point, and I think can be a key outreach element to attract new customers in your service areas. And other programs have used various amounts of marketing outreach. We've seen billboards, we've seen statement stuffers, radio advertising. I've heard postcard mailers, doing a workshop and making that as training for contractors, but also outreach to the community, websites, and connect with your local energy conscious groups as well. So, all good points in being able to devise the program that's best for you. All right, I'm going to turn it over now to Sherry Eddy. She is the CEO of Jackson Metro Credit Union. She created the Home Performance Loans Program. She's based in Jacksonville, Florida. Sherry began this program on the heels of the RS stimulus and energy efficiency conservation block grants, and she really is a pioneer and an early adopter in devising and promoting these kind of programs. She's been a longtime partner with SEIA on her energy efficiency programs, and I've asked her to come here today and share her story and her lesson learned and her best practices. So, Sherry, I'll turn it over to you, and I'll be glad to move the slides for you.
Okay, thank you, Travis. That was a great introduction. Our program, as Travis alluded to, actually began in 2012. We were approached by our local utility department, which is known as JEA, as they had received grant money for energy upgrades in the home, and they were looking at financial institutions to administer those funds, in other words, loan and collect those payments on funds. And because utility workers, the Energy Authority here in Jacksonville, is actually our primary field of membership, it was kind of like we couldn't say no. So we jumped into this quite unknowing what we were getting into. We are a Florida chartered credit union. For whoever is familiar with credit unions, you can either be state or federal. We happen to be a state, so we operate under the laws of Florida. We've been in business since 1935, which means we're over 80 years old now. And again, we were actually organized by utility workers in this area back in 1935. The Better Buildings Partnership was formed in 2011, and again, we came on board in 2012. In the initial, overall, and these slides are dated a little bit. At that point in time, we had blown 1.4 million, but in reality, as of 2017, because we do continue the program, although it's not as we don't do as many loans as we used to. Just because of the, I think it has a lot to do with the cycles in the economy and the energy consciousness of people. And right now they don't seem to be as top of mind as they were at some point, although I am receiving a good amount of interest in solar, at least here in Florida. Over $2 million for these loans. Initially, we had opened at least 170 new members or accounts. These were people that probably otherwise would not have become members of this credit union, but because of the program that we were offering and the exposure we were given through our partnerships, we gained these accounts. This is the actual what the first program looks like, and the reason I call these phases is because we obviously can't do 0% today. We were able to offer a 0% loan back in 2012 because of the grant that our utility authority had received. And of course, you can imagine that money did not last very long. I told them it would not, and I was correct, it did not. At maybe 3 months, the 0% money ran out. We advertised the program as a zero net payment, and what that meant is we had hoped to gain the, by recommending certain upgrades, that they would gain the amount of savings on their electric bill that would equal the payment they were paying, so that there would basically be a zero net effect to their monthly debt situation. We didn't require any equity in the home. We did look at their home value and what have you, but it was not a consideration as far as approval or non-approval. Again, that didn't even count because there was no mortgage. These were completely unsecured loans. We had terms up to 10 years. We had a limit in the beginning of the program of $20,000. Today, we're looking at people wanting, because they're doing more extensive, the requests we get because they're involving solar, today some of the requests are hitting up to like $50,000. So we're re-looking at our program because of that. 1.1 million loaned in the beginning, 116 home upgrades in this first phase. The average loan was $9,500. Average loan term was about 70 months, and the average payment was about $132. And of course, that would have been, I mean, if you know anything about loan amortization, what have you, $132 would probably be about a 7 to 10 year loan, which we tried to gauge based on the life of the improvement they were doing for an HVAC. Generally, it was HVAC was most of what we did. Some of the things that we learned in the program is it was important to develop partnerships, specifically with the companies that were making the improvements to the homeowner, to make sure that they followed the guidelines. In the beginning, we had audits that were performed, which were very helpful in educating the homeowner. And we still recommend audits, although there's not, at the beginning, in 2012, the audits were paid for. And so obviously everybody got an audit. Today, that's not the case, so it's a little bit tougher for us to make that sell. Employee with training was very important. Our employees, we found very quickly from our advertising and from our solicitations to our partners that we get a phone call about a loan for a upgrade, and our employees needed to be well educated in various upgrades, what savings they could expect, what general costs would be, and so they became experts almost in themselves, just from talking to so many of the partners and so many of the people that were making upgrades. So there were a lot of lessons learned, a lot of education of our employees. We were very proactive in all kinds of green lending, which we extended to automobiles as well. And so we've done a few of those as well, where we discount the rate for what we consider an energy efficient automobile. We had to give very rapid turnaround. Generally, a lot of these, well, we especially found here in Florida, a lot of the calls we would get, at least in the beginning, is somebody would be without air conditioning, and it'd be 100 degrees, and they didn't care about an audit. They didn't care about anything. All they cared about was getting their AC fixed. And so we had to be able to push a loan out, gain approval, generally within that day that they called, so 24 hours max, and then be able to push the money out at probably within 2 to 3 days, depending on the backlog that the contractor would have in completing the work. We tried to give a lot of homeowner education. We had handouts specifically that explained various upgrades and various checkpoints that they should ask their contractor to make sure that they were actually performing things that should be performed. And a lot of the homeowner education were just simple things like weatherization, things that they could do themselves that would save energy as well. And so we provided all that information at no charge to pretty much anybody that called, even if they didn't get a loan, we provided that information. Okay, next one, Travis. Did you skip one? Yeah. Okay. We found that it was a very good market niche. There's really not a lot of competition when it comes to making loans for energy efficient upgrades to the home. Generally, most of the other lenders are looking at mortgages, and they're not actually geared specifically towards what I call the green community, in that. And you can divide that community up into, probably 2 groups. You've got people that really are into saving energy because they care about the environment, and they don't really care what it costs. They just know, hey, we need to do this. And then you got the people that, hey, I just need to get this work done because I don't have an AC. But in any event, it was still a good niche for us. We saw membership growth, as I've told you, the number of new members we found previously. It opened opportunities for cross-selling of other services. Today, we are seeing repeat or returning members that are coming back to us for other services, because obviously when they became a member in 2012, simply to have this, this energy efficient loan, they became a part of our database. They became a part of all our marketing programs. So whatever we're doing, they would receive information. And so those people are starting to call us and ask us about some of those solicitations. So we may be doing opening checking accounts or doing car loans or whatever, beyond what we're doing as far as our green lending. We found delinquency was fairly low in these. The delinquency, of course, we've got now 5 years, is it? Yeah, about 5 years in the program. So we are starting to see some uptick in the delinquency. Generally, what we see that I would probably look at a little closer is people that leave their home if they are prone to move or change residence a lot. That would be a uptick of a potential non-pay. And then people that are just having trouble paying their existing bills, if they've got some credit issues. We were pretty lenient in the beginning of the program and kind of didn't look at that as closely. Today, I would say that's not very wise. I would say, you know, if they're not paying their bills or they're not paying other things, even though they're likely to pay it in the beginning, they'll start taking it for granted after 2 or 3 years, and you're going to have an uptick in delinquency in those groups. So we tightened that down a little bit as we've gone forward. There's many partnership opportunities. I began participating in a lot of the green functions in this in the area, and they have and there's just a whole nother, I call it a whole nother world of a target group, actually, from a financial institution standpoint, a whole nother group of people that operate in the energy saving world, and from building homes to energy efficient systems to anything you can imagine, cars, automobile, everything, just to save energy. And then there's a lot of people that they just care. They might not be even in the industry, but they come to these groups and these meetings because they have a concern for the environment. So there were lots of opportunities there. We found some grants and marketing assistance from our regulators from the National Credit Union Administration, that we were able to gain some grants for this program to do some marketing. So that was very nice. So I would ask around about that, because it's you know, again, they're looking at things that when they give you these grant money, you know, are you doing things that are helping the community? And I would say you can make a pretty good case to that. And again, I've already alluded to, the energy saving community really does generate leads once you get into those circles and get to know those people. This is phase 2 of the program, where we got a little more specific with the packages and the upgrades. The magic number for us at that point in time was trying to get 15% savings on their electric bill, and they could do that with either one thing from this stuff on the left, generally, or a combination of these things on the right. And we had estimates, that they're not, you know, they're all just estimates. That's what they are, of like if you just did an attic seal, what you might expect to save with that. And so it really all depended on the size of the house and the current use of energy and the quality of the work that was being done. But we still had at least some guidelines that they could go by and things to do. And very often we use these because some of the, like I said, weatherization and simple things like window filming and stuff like that, there are some inexpensive things that they can do. And if we could get them to do an audit, they would have like a list of stuff that they could do. And so they could do those at their leisure. I know that I had an audit and had it done, and I didn't do everything. Day one. One of the things that I upgraded was my HVAC, but then my water heater was very old, but it was still working, and I didn't really feel like replacing it. But when it came time to replace it a few years down the road, you know, I was looking at the, gosh, I can't think of the name of it now, the heat pump, the actual heat pump water heaters that are very efficient here in Florida. So I had a lot of knowledge to do that from our program. Just Energy Star appliances. That's a simple no-brainer too. Okay, what you got next there, Travis? This is pretty much the program as it stands today. We basically have an adjustable rate because of the term of the loan, and so we adjust it based on prime. We also give a discount on the rate if they get an audit. The payment is a % of what their balance is when they do an advance, and so they get a line of credit for a year. And our data processing system actually, when an advance is made, so we don't have to really manually go in and do this. They may get an advance today, and the line of credit sits out there for a year. They may do something a couple of months from now, and it'll go in and adjust that payment based on that advance being made on that loan. And of course, we disclose that when we initially give them the line of credit in the beginning. Okay? Was that it there, Travis? I have one more, challenges. There was a number of challenges that we met in the program. There was nobody else doing it, so there was no report models of what we could expect, or, you know, make loans to these kind of credit-worthy people or not. There was limited historical tracking, negative peer modeling. The people that we had found that had done these types of loans, and they were generally unsecured, they were not very positively done. I think it's because of a couple of reasons. They just didn't form the right partnerships with their contractors, and they didn't educate their consumers as well as I think they needed to. So there were challenges to underwriting these, especially when you're talking unsecured money. And so if they already had a lot of unsecured money, of course that was a concern. Too much unsecured can certainly lead to bankruptcy. We have seen that in some of our experience. You know, although it isn't a predicted indicator that they're going to file bankruptcy just because of that, but it is one thing that I would say that you should look at. The biggest operating barrier is the quality standards, and to this day, I still don't know what or how we could ensure that if you get your HVAC replaced, as an example, that you get a quality job where they're doing everything they're supposed to do. They come back the next day and they check all the various indicators to make sure the system is performing the way it's supposed to. We have no way to enforce that. We used to, when we had the audits, do a little bit better job because the auditor would go back out and would actually measure that stuff. But now the best we can do is tell our homeowners, this is what you should ask your contractor to do, and these are the points that are important. And hopefully they'll follow those, but we know all the time they don't. So that's an area that's a barrier for us. Sales versus actual savings, especially when you talk about the solar. I'm very cautious with that because that's picking up here in Florida now. We're getting calls from people that are being told these astronomical. Well, they're actually selling that they're going to be making money selling it back to the utility authority because these systems are going to generate so much energy, and that just isn't happening. I can think of at least 2 instances of people that have spent more money than they should have that have been very disappointed and are consequently in litigation with some of these contractors that made some wild and crazy promises. So we tried to make sure that, you know, when they give us something that they want to do to the home, that it's realistic, you know, if you're going to spend $50,000 and save $100 on your electric bill, for example, is that a realistic thing to do? Maybe some of these green people really don't care, and if they can borrow that kind of money and afford that, okay. But we feel it's our obligation to at least point those types of things out, which goes along with the next bullet there, just educating homeowners if certain upgrades and the cost of those upgrades make sense. And then quality scope of the work is well defined. That's a big area. If you take the invoices that are the proposals for work, not the invoices, but the proposals for work, they really should be pretty descriptive. And I would say 95% of the time they just aren't adequately outlining the actual scope of the work. And so, and when that matters is after the work's done. If something's not what to do, that's going to cost you more money. So it's really important that the contractors give a well-written scope of work. In the beginning of our program, we actually had, because our utility authority had actually allocated resources, meaning personnel, people, that would review those invoices or those proposals, and they would make comments. This needs to be added, or this needs to be changed. We don't have that anymore, but it was a huge benefit at that point in time. And that, again, that to me is a barrier today, that we don't have somebody actually knowledgeable enough to actually look at those proposals for work and make sure that the scope of work is well enough defined. Okay, thank you all very much. If you have anybody have any questions, I'll be happy to try and address them.
Yeah, I think we will have some questions come in on the type pad, and so I'll moderate those a little bit later.
Okay, great, Travis. I'm here.
Thank you very much. And you heard 5 years worth of experience in those handful of slides. You know, some great takeaways from those slides. You know, the LOC aspect of the loan, to be able to allow customers to be able to kind of use the money as they need it without, you know, overpaying for interest. And then I think, you know, strengthening, you know, the strength of the partnership with the contractors is really important. They need to be trusted, quality work, follow up. I mean, you know, the work of the project, you know, to the best of everyone's abilities, as she said, you know, needs to be the quality that was represented. And it's a very hard thing to, you know, completely manage, but I think that's where those strong partnerships come in. And I think, and that's the experience and the practices that Sherry has gathered over doing this for 5 years. I really are a pioneer, and I appreciate you sharing that with us today. So our next is Tracy Graham from Bancorp South. I called Tracy as part of this outreach effort, talking with banks around the Southeast, but when she told me that she had energy efficiency experience at her previous job, let me tell you, we became fast friends. So as she talked over the story of being at the city of Shreveport and their Shreveport Energy Efficiency Division, I knew it was a good story, very much in keeping with the things that Sherry has done over in Jacksonville and the kind of program and process and also thought process that I'm trying to promote with this outreach. So just have her hit some points about this story, and Tracy, go ahead and take over, and we appreciate you being here too.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I was actually the Energy Efficiency Program Manager for the City of Shreveport. I was appointed by the mayor at that time in 2011. The City of Shreveport received about $1.9 million through the Energy Efficiency Community Block Grant. And with that, part of the stipulation is some people wanted to have someone within the City of Shreveport to look at programs as this. As far as the initial program that was set up with the City of Shreveport, the energy audit was actually what you call the trigger to actually even qualify for the program. With the City of Shreveport, there was offered a $100 energy audit, and with that audit, there would be a preliminary visit by a state certified rater. The City of Shreveport actually worked with those raters, and those energy raters signed a partnership agreement with the City of Shreveport to do that. With that, through that process, they would go out and actually do the energy audits and give reports. Even when the client or citizen got the report, I also received a copy of the report in order to, because you know an energy audit does not just cost $100. We're talking about $500–600 in this market for a full-blown energy audit. So before they were paid, I would get a copy, and the citizen would also get a copy to verify what was on there, and then at that point, they would contact Bancorp South. The partnership with Bancorp South in the city of Shreveport, they actually did a lending contract, a partnership contract to do loans for energy efficiency. That contract involved interest rate buydowns as well as loan loss reserve. With those loans, there were about 300 people that participated in the program during that time period, and about 10 to 15% of those people did use the financing. Many times we found that a lot of the people that, like you said, the first responders is what I call them, the people that really see the energy efficiency as being important. A lot of those people use their own funding or own home equity lines or whatever else, but the loan program that we had available, which is still available at Bancorp South, was done as a home equity line. So as far as turnaround, there was not a week or so that people had to wait, because there was a situation where you were dealing with contractors in the same situation like was mentioned in Florida. In Louisiana, it can get hot and very humid here, and many times in order to qualify for the lower interest rates which were offered, the rates that were offered were 2.99 to 5.49, loan amounts from $3,000 to $15,000, and there were no mortgages filed, so it was just notice not to encumber. So it wasn't attaching liens and all that to the property. So it was a very attractive program, and at the same time, the state of Louisiana back in 2011, 2012 was offering a rebate. So on top of that, residents in the state of Louisiana could get up to $3,000 back in forms of a cash rebate if they did energy efficiency improvement. So during the 2011-2013 time period, that was really an attractive time to do energy efficiency in addition to the solar rebates we had available. Once a citizen did do the energy audit for the $100, and if they decided they wanted to go forward, they would contact the Bancorp South representative, start the application process. Once the work was completed, an energy rater would go out, just like on the Jacksonville project. They would go back out and verify the work. And that's the thing that I think is probably key to any of these programs, is having someone to verify what is being done. That would not leaving that up to, in a sense, a banker or someone else. There would need to be something in place to do that. As far as the partnerships, our local utility, AEP SWEPCO, actually partnered with us and donated dollars, or made a contribution of dollars for helping with marketing and outreach. They helped with flyers. They helped with, I started a program on a quarterly basis. I had something called Seed Talks. Instead of TED Talks, I had Seed Talks. And on a quarterly basis, we have Barksdale Air Force Base here. We have a lot of military. And so there's a lot going on with energy efficiency. So if you have any areas where you have partnerships as far as your military and things like that, those are other great avenues, because the military is doing a lot of energy efficiency improvements throughout the government. So we would have these on a quarterly basis, and we'd have different companies to come in. It was a great opportunity to network and find out what people really wanted. And like I said, again, the first responders are the people that come in and just go in and pay whatever to get it done. As currently now, most of the loans that were outstanding have been paid. There may be 2 or 3 loans still outstanding. I am currently now with Bancorp South. I was there for about 5.5 years. And again, we just recently, but prior to me leaving, we started doing the $100 energy audit for small commercial. And most people say, well, what's the big deal with that? Small commercial are your churches, your dentist's office. And so we wanted to make it available to those small business owners, and that could be another way to have business development for the banks in that sense, as far as helping these small businesses in these areas to do some energy efficiency improvements to, again, it all comes to the bottom line for a small business. As far as the portfolio performance, there was no delinquency on ours. We had many of the clients that did the improvements, did need very many improvements. Many of the clients needed insulation and things of that sort. The ones that needed the systems upgrades and the windows types. Those are the ones that we ended up financing. Not sure if any additional questions on that, but as far as marketing and outreach, it was a one-person shop. So as far as education and outreach, that was done through schools. Like I said, again, partnership with the local, any of the local organizations that deal with engineering, a lot of engineering firms, Barksdale Air Force Base, as I mentioned, military. If you have any military bases in your community, try to find a way to engage with that community because they're really knowledgeable about many of these products, and that's a good area to actually engage people also.
Yeah, Tracy, I think you mentioned this, but I didn't mention it earlier, but I think you had a good partnerships too with Housing Authority, Housing Finance, and also like area action agencies around Shreveport. What they're more involved
Yes.
as well.
We found many times that many of the energy hogs or energy users in most cities and states are your apartment complexes, multifamily living or housing facilities, because a lot of times you have people that have different schedules, and again, things are not turned off. So what we basically did was partner and do education with some of the renters, and also go out and speak to the even our landlords about how they could do the program, because in order to participate, you had to own the property. And we did see quite a few landlords to try to become a part of it, because if you think about it, when a person have expenses that, say for instance, a person is dealing with housing, their housing rent may only be, depending on the city, like someone here, it could be $130 a month, but your energy costs are $350 a month. That could cause a person to leave that property without notice. And so that's the reason we presented to many of the people that had homes that were rented on, even homes that were rented through the Section 8 programs or whatever. It had, again, your affordability is basically about being able, you have $100 rent, but you're having $300 utility costs. That's just a disconnect for many people, and I ran into that many times when we did presentations to those, the Housing Authority and Section 8, different types of things. But again, as far as delinquency, we did not have any. The Public Service Commission was another great partner for us for the state, really making sure you're engaged with your local city officials, city government, because there is someone that believes in that program. That really helped me. There were a couple of city councilmen that were really advocates for green living and for energy efficiency, and that really helps a lot when you have some advocates on your behalf as far as your state public service commission and your local government.
Yeah, agreed. I tried to make that point earlier, and I think you showed how it can actually work in practice. And I think this is the only program of its kind in Louisiana, correct? Or
yes, it was the only. Well, they still have it available. I don't know if they've replaced me yet, but as far as the underwriting, I wanted to mention that as far as with the underwriting, there was no adjustment for underwriting, and that could be something to look at. It would have to be maybe something created again, but you definitely would not want to. A bank would not want to change the way they do their underwriting, because as I heard, maybe with Jackson, there could be issues with that. And even with the energy efficiency, we always stressed in any of our, we did commercials, television, radio, Facebook was something that I had the CD even had a Facebook, and you had people that wanted to know what was going on as far as energy efficiency. We always promoted to do your energy efficiency pieces first, and that's something that has to be a part of the education. A lot of the companies want to sell the solar systems, but if you again, it's like baking a cake. If you don't put something in, it's not going to happen, right? So the solar is your icing on the cake. They must take care of the insulation, duct sealing, all those different things first, because it will not be an effective product. And again, that's why many people are disappointed, because the solar is sold first, and they may have an issue with the duct system, insulation, or something else that they probably could have fixed for a lot less, and the solar they would have seen a better outcome on the solar.
Yeah, agreed. And as you had discussed before too, also looking at those, community agencies, local city and counties that have rehabilitation programs for affordable housing, and make sure that that it's structurally sound to begin with, like you had mentioned, duct testing and things like that.
Yes. And if we're trying to go into communities that have those issues, community development, most cities have the community development departments, you're right, and they have rehab programs, but sometimes you find properties that are in such disrepair, without such, where the roof is caving in, you really can't go in. You have to get certain things done to get the house in order before you can do some of these things.
Right. Yeah, I agree. I think it's the first things first there, and that's why I see a vertical path for all that to be able to repair and revitalize this building stock. So I agree. Well, thank you so much, Tracy. I appreciate you sharing that story with us today. You're once again another pioneer over there in Louisiana, and a one-woman shop to boot. But really appreciate those best practices you shared, and I think we share a common vision on how meaningful these programs can be, through efficiency.
Thank you.
All right, I'll recap things and try not to drone on too long here in the closing slides. And both Sherry and Tracy are great experts, and I appreciate them sharing their stories with us, and they're great resources as well. Some program support from SEIA if you're looking at an energy efficiency loan program that can also have some CRA compliance. We're looking to provide technical assistance on your program design, like you heard today, some best practices from the experts that you heard from, how effective partnerships really are key, helping with underwriting criteria and developing your local partnerships. All reiterated is very important to this kind of program, and we're happy to do a deeper dive on that with you if you want to look at creating this kind of program. And then also network connection to CRA stakeholders, peer-to-peer learning opportunities, much like what you heard today, and then networking opportunities with those local agencies that are working in those housing support programs. And SEIA has an extensive Rolodex around the Southeast. May or may not know the folks that you're specifically trying to get in touch with, but if it's helpful at all, please let us be the conduit, let us be the convener to bring it together and have those conversations. And then also something that I'm doing as a part of this outreach, I'm collecting some overviews of some of the CDFIs that are out there, these 501c3s, that they're doing this kind of activity in the CRA space, mostly multifamily housing, maybe some commercial. I'll be happy to share those when I'm done, and obviously it would not be any kind of endorsement for one over the other, but just a place to make you aware that they are out there doing that kind of activity, and perhaps you want to look at doing external funding in energy efficiency for CRA compliance. And to kind of recap those points real quick, if you want to look at outside investment instead of possibly standing up your own internal program, there's established entities out there working in this space, and if you make a qualified investment into that kind of entity, you do get immediate CRA credit. So that's an incentive to do that if you think that's the best path for your bank to invest in. Obviously, banks determine their own underwriting methods for who they would select for that kind of thing. And I'm also optimistic, and I've seen some of these entities pop up. I just read about one in Minnesota the other day. These new 501c3s, maybe joint ventures, third parties that are created, and they're originating and underwriting and funding and servicing these kind of investments. There was the multi-agency partnership up in Minnesota that one of those was involved in, looking at what I think is an emerging market. So as we're getting more momentum in this market of EE lending and then also blending it with CRA, I think you're going to see more opportunities to be able to have some outside investment there if you so choose. Next steps to explore that I think we've kind of covered to date, do an internal capacity assessment, see if you have a staffing capacity to handle this internally. You heard Sherry and you heard Tracy talk about, kind of doing some of that employee education, and also you do the customer education and the contractor education. So I think that's all should be fairly evaluated. Look at your service area, look at that community review, maybe find the one that could be the most viable community with the connections you already have there and the possible partnerships that you could do a pilot implementation of your program there. And then do a program partner assessment, the utilities, the government, the contractors, and some of the agencies that we talked about that, kind of can help with some of that vertical structural, assessment for housing to get it stabilized and then put energy efficiency on it and then have it, working at maximum, optimum performance, of course. And I think doing that assessment will help you guide where you can have that pilot program and be able to launch such a program. And then just a recap of the takeaways today. Hopefully I've established that this blending of energy efficiency and the Community Reinvestment Act has a lot of wins for banks, and then also being able to help low and moderate income residences and community centers, and then be able to partner with all the stakeholders that are involved in that. These partnerships are key, I keep belaboring, and they really are key. I think they're most important in being able to find where is the best opportunity for success to stand up this kind of program. Talk to the city and county and your utilities and your contractors, and then decide on your own as a bank, do I want to look at creating an internal program, or do I think it's best for us for various reasons to look at funding into an external program, a CDFI or whatever, that has some LMI inclusion and could be a qualified CRA investment. And then these vertical connections, like we mentioned as well, housing rehabilitation, community redevelopment agencies and entities. I think we can make real meaningful impact in this housing stock, multifamily housing, of course, to be included, and use efficiency to be able to revitalize that segment and kind of stabilize, like you heard Tracy talk about, a $100 rent and $300 utility bill. That's inverted, and let's do what we can to help that process get repaired through these kind of programs. And that's it. I'll conclude with that today. I want to thank everybody again, Wesley and Sherry and Tracy, for joining us today and being a part of this. I hope you got something out of it. If you have any questions we can see on the type pad, we're glad to answer them. And if not, I want to thank everybody for attending and have a great day. Thanks so much. Wesley?
Thanks, Travis. Yeah, unfortunately, I think we're just at time now, and I don't want to keep people beyond their time commitment today, but I'll just check real quick. If you do have any questions, please feel free to reach out at info@calliance.org, and we're happy to follow up and answer any questions you have. We will be making this the recording of this webinar available for you to share with your colleagues who you think would benefit from the information. And yeah, I'll just echo Travis's thanks to all of our presenters. We appreciate you guys taking part and sharing your expertise with us today. And with that, we will go ahead and close out and hope you all have a wonderful day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.